Planning Commission meeting for Thursday, October 20th. We'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll start off with item 3.1, which is the Pledge of Allegiance offered by Wendy.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Wendy. We do have a full quorum today. Actually, everybody is in attendance, which is nice. Do we have any conflicts of interest with any items on the agenda?
No.
Seeing none, we'll look for a motion for approval of minutes for the August 18th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve item 3.4.
Motion made by Heather. All in favor?
Aye.
Second and a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Adam. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to administrative items. I'm just making sure we don't have any public hearings. We do have one public hearing, which is a legislative item later. And our public comment policy and procedure is the purpose of public comment is to allow citizens to address the items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to the deputy city recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 3 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. All right. And then we'll start off with our administrative items. Item 4.1, consideration of a conditional use for our pet suites.
All right. Yeah, so this is a new commercial development, a proposal in the Anthem commercial area. Located next to, that's Winco there, and the Jiffy Lube. And you can see it's in the C2 zone. So Pet Suites is an animal boarding and daycare service. Their building proposal is a little under 11,000 square feet. They do have a masonry fenced area around part of the building, along with bike parking. They're required for this, both a kennel and an animal care service. The parking requirement is 4 stalls and plus 1 stall per employee on the busiest shift. The number that they gave us was 10, so the 4 and then 6 employees would be the highest shift. So they provide ample parking. The elevations include limestone, concrete wall panels, and flagstone, as you can see, and they did get approval from the Architectural Review Committee of the Anthem commercial area. These are the required setbacks in a C2 zone, and they're pretty far from all sides of the parcel and meet those requirements. Maximum height would be 45, and they're about 27 feet. As you know, with a conditional use, we look at these aspects of a project. The one thing that came across city or staff's mind when we were going over this is the potential noise and odor that can come from animals potentially. When we brought this up to the applicant, they said that's why they're putting in a masonry fence. And kind of, they do have other locations and know how to control those potential odors and potential noises. So that being said, staff does recommend approval. There were a few minor landscaping corrections that need to be made. There was an issue with the neighboring park project that's going in as well. The sidewalks weren't aligning, so we just put that in. Since making this presentation, that kind of has been resolved, and it's more on the other property, but just so you know, that's why that was there. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that there's someone, I believe there's someone here tonight, and then also somebody online to answer any questions you have for them.
Great. Any questions for Talia?
right.
Right, let you have a seat. If the applicant's here, if they want to come up, just state your name and then if there's any additional information you'd like to share.
Sure. Chris Bick with Kimley Horn. Yeah, I don't really have anything additional to add. I know that the concerns about noise and cleanliness were brought up and addressed previously in previous meetings. I know Pet Sweets is on the call and could probably speak more to that, but in the meeting, they were talking about how they clean the facility 3 times a day. If there's dogs out in the dog run that are being noisy, they bring them inside so that they're not being noisy around there. And then I think just this overall location next to the other commercial spots is a good spot for it. But yeah, if you have any questions or concerns,
Any questions for the applicant?
I just had a quick thought. How does, I see that there's 2 ways to get 2 entrances for the vehicles off the roads. How close is this entrance to the next one down that goes into the grocery store?
on
If I'm reading this correctly.
What page are we on? Maybe we can pull it on the map,
Yeah, if you
pull
can
it up
pull it.
so he can see it.
Yeah, if we can see the site plan. So we have the
That's a good one.
there's 2 vehicle entrances. There's the one coming off Denali. How far down is it to the next entrance off Denali? Going into
like in the other parcel that's not developed
goes into the
yet?
other parcel,
Is
or
that-
does it go all the way into the grocery store? I just didn't know how it tied in as a whole with the rest of the,
Yeah, so the one that goes south ties into it doesn't go into Denali, it goes into the neighboring parcel so that they can connect to that and use the same access if they needed to.
but it doesn't go all the way through to the grocery store or anything beyond.
I don't. On
It's on the other side. It's
yeah.
over, I can't see my finger, but on the, I guess, left
On
of
the left
the
side.
project. And then Mountain View and Denali. So this is another project going in, and
It goes right here.
there we go.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
But yeah, Mountain View's kind of off to the front. So the part that's.
Yeah, so the backside's towards the back of Winco.
The backside's towards Winco, and then, okay, so so you'd have to drive all the way through this next one to get through that access. Okay, thank you, that's what I wanted to.
I have a question about the outdoor fence area. What kind of material is being used for that, and how high is it?
That's a masonry fence. I believe it was it limestone,
7'4".
but 6 feet or 8? 8 feet,
Hey,
thank
Pete.
you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
I think that's Jonathan there.
Yeah,
Any other questions?
I like the 8 feet versus 6.
All right. If there's no other questions, then we'll let you have a seat.
Thank you.
Any discussion or a motion to be made?
I'd like to make a motion to approve item 4.1 with
second
staff's
that.
2 recommendations.
Motion made by Adam, a second by Jackson, and we'll call for a vote. Andrea?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And Brody?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. We'll move on to item 4.2, a consideration of a conditional use for Take 5.
I told you, this is that parcel I've talked about for years. I know, I have. Nobody knew it was a parcel.
Well, maybe unbeknownst to many of us here, that was Talia's last presentation. We'll get her back up here and embarrass her a little bit later, but you're going to be stuck with the B team, so.
Agreed.
All right, so this is a conditional use for Take 5 Oil. It's located over here in the Smith's parking lot, just off 134th.
Oh, that's where it's going.
Whoa. Dots are kind of taking over. So you can see the area highlighted in the cloud there, the red cloud, and that's the site overlaid onto the aerial to kind of represent what this will look like, where it will be, entrances, exits, and how it interacts with the rest of the properties around it. So where this is a conditional use, of course, we look at all the detrimental effects. One of the major ones that, so of course there's a traffic concern, in terms of circulation through the site and also parking. And those issues have been resolved through staff's approval. The Smiths has okayed the design. At first, when the project first came through, it was an east-west orientation in terms of traffic access, and then they flipped the site, so it was more north and south. They felt like that, the circulation would work better that way. Either way, the circulation pattern does work. They are providing 9 stalls just within the site itself for stacking, which should be adequate for the service that they're providing. The main concern we had in terms of conditional use considerations was just on connectivity for safety and for pedestrians and bicyclists. This, of course, being an auto-oriented site. So the proposal is for an 1,800 square foot building, largely exterior, a brick exterior. There's 25 parking stalls, and then 9 stacking stalls, which will kind of take place just to the north of the building. And they have proposed 24% landscaping, which is over the 15% required. Some of the landscaping does go over the property line, and they've, again, gone back to the group as a whole and then gotten permission from the overall development to landscape over the property lines and have their parking there as well. So those concerns have been worked through. You can see the elevations of the building from the north side. I think it's that top, I want to say it's the top left. Or is that the south side? Oh, okay, you're right. Yep, so bottom left is what you'll see from, so top left is what you'll see from the street, bottom left is what you'll see from Smith's. Again, here, this is just another vicinity map, kind of giving you a better idea of how the site works, where the building's going to be located, where the stacking spaces will take place, how the ingress and egress works, and how it interacts with the rest of the development there. So in terms of consideration, looking at how it affects pedestrian traffic, they are showing a painted crosswalk from the public sidewalk to their building. We always recommend that they do a different texture, whether it's a different material or a different texture of the asphalt, to make that a little clearer that that's a pedestrian walkway, to help cars acknowledge that. And then the bicycle parking was not provided, but it is required. That being said, we do recommend approval of the proposal with those conditions that we've talked about. Are there any other questions I can answer now?
I have one. Where is the limits of disturbance that they will be doing? Is it the property line? What I'd like to try and avoid, and I don't know how to articulate this, is by where the Vasa went in, the pavement, the Vasa, where the Vasa is, you can tell that there was not a lot of coordination between the pavement and the curb and gutters, and so there's like some big, nice, beautiful ponds that form every so often in the pavement, and I would just like to make sure that our engineering staff looks at that as they coordinate it so it flows well.
I don't think that the area of disturbance is the entire parcel. I think it's just that portion.
I'm just saying where they cut in curbs, typically sometimes that's not the way the water flows, and they create little ponds and valleys. So I'd just like to make sure we look at that when it gets to engineering, is what I would say.
Okay. And I don't know if engineering wants to speak to that, or the applicants here too, they could address that a little bit better.
It's just more of a design flaw that I think we need to focus on.
Something to be aware of.
It flows together well.
Right.
So that's all.
Clint, is there anything you want to share real quick, and then we'll let the applicant come up and share? Okay.
I'll share it out.
All right, then. We'll let you sit down. We'll let the applicant come up. If you just want to state your name for the record.
Jeremy Draper with Reeves and Associates.
Thank you. Do you want to answer his question? Start, then you can talk about anything else relevant to this.
Commissioner Jacobson there. With the drainage patterns that we've got now, we're not proposing any new storm drain boxes with this project. We're actually just following the original patterns of the parking lot. So I'll run through, double check that, just make sure that we don't cause any issues with that in the future as this is being constructed.
That's fine. Cool. Thank you.
Anything else you want to share? in regards to the project?
No, it's a great project, a new concept for the oil change. The customer stays in the car as oil's being changed, so there's no need for the customer parking or for them to actually exit the vehicle. Oil's changed in about 10, 15 minutes and quick in, quick out, and it seemed to be working out great for these guys.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Will there be like in and out signage in the parking lot? Like
What's
this
that?
is the way you enter and this is the way you exit? Will you have something like that, either like signage or on the, directional signage?
Yeah, as far as any directional signage, we don't have any on this one at this time. We do anticipate, people will notice that the entrance is from the north side.
Okay.
And so we can work with staff on any additional striping on the parking lot itself to make sure that that's clear.
Thanks.
Thank you. Further discussion?
No, I was just going to say, item 4 on the staff's recommendation was for signing.
Oh, is it?
Signing's not approved
Thank you.
yet, so I'll
So it'll come back.
get that approved.
I have to admit, the only, and rarely do I think something's not applicable that's already in our requirements as a city, but I question why
Bike?
we require bicycle parking for this one.
That was my thought.
Employees.
Employees, come on.
Right, and so, I don't know if that's, so it's something that's in our ordinance, right? It's a requirement for every site.
Sure.
I don't know if there's a provision in our ordinance that can be waived.
Yeah, if there isn't, then there's not much we can do, but
So there's potential for, employees to come or
sure.
whatever.
Okay. We'll assume they ride their bikes.
For your trails, Chris, so
Does
people
it
can
say
ride from
what
your trails.
all
to
the kind of loops they do?
Get their car, yeah,
Come on.
from bike to car.
In case I want to ride my bike through oil my chain.
You never know.
So, we're excited though. We're excited to have you. Any other discussion on this item, guys? Then we'll look for a motion to be made.
I'll make a motion to approve item 4.2 with staff's 4 recommendations.
I'll second.
Motion made by Andy, a second by Heather. We'll call for a vote. Andrea?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We'll move on to item 5.1, and this is on for a public hearing.
I don't have a presentation for this. Oh, I do have a presentation. I didn't see
You
it.
didn't even know how good you were.
Jonathan prepared this for me, so excellent. We'll see if my notes follow along with the presentation. Before I start, I did spend 4 hours today meeting with our environmental consultant and the Department of Environmental Remediation Response representative and the EPA. And I drugged Michael to that meeting, and so misery loves company. It was a great 4-hour meeting. But there was a lot to discuss. And so this item is somewhat related to that meeting we had today, and was actually presented several months ago to the Planning Commission by Jonathan Bowers, one of our engineers. And it's coming back to you now at this time with some changes. So just a little background. There is contaminated soil in Herriman. In 2001 and leading up to that time, the EPA conducted a study for the area. They created an area, or designated an area called the Kennecott South Zone. And they created operable units within there. And operable unit 5 includes like Daybreak, and 6 has some ditches. And it's all categorized by what type of contamination there is, what level it is, what material it is, how it transports and stuff. The area we're looking at is called Operable Unit 3. It's the Kennecott South Zone Operable Unit 3. It comes from Butterfield Creek, and it's generally characterized as lead and arsenic that was transported from the canyon from mining operations prior to Kennecott and including some of Kennecott through irrigation ditches and canals. And so it was sediment transported down and then deposited onto the farmlands. So it's typically fine material. It's, like I said, lead and arsenic, and it's generally found within the top 12 to 18 inches of soil. Sometimes it goes a little bit deeper, but not much deeper. Like, I think all the studies that we've reviewed, we've never found anything deeper than 2 feet. And so the purpose of this discussion is when that study was done by the EPA, they created a record of decision, and they gave Herriman City institutional controls. So we get to make the decisions that the EPA typically makes. And the record of decision document gave us a framework and said, you know, here are some recommendations for action levels for contamination. And the table you can see off to the right is pretty close to what the record of decision recommended. Just to note, one difference is the residential level for lead. Record of decision actually recommended 1,200 parts per million, and the 1,600 was adopted by the council prior to the record of decision being finalized because of a University of Utah study that had been completed that suggested that the higher level was okay. The item we're talking about tonight, the EPA and Department of Environmental Remediation Response, DER is what we call them, so DER, they have approached the city several times over the past few years regarding our commercial action level for lead. At some point in the last several years, it was adopted as 5,000 parts per million, which exceeds the record of decision recommendation. And so they've contacted us several times to come back and get that lowered down to within the limits recommended in the ROD. The other items we plan to come back and adjust, and I guess let me back up on that a little bit. When the council at the time, there's a lot of history in this, Adam probably knows a lot of it. When the council at the time adopted standards, action levels for residential and non-residential properties. But in the record of decision, we have all these other uses, residential, commercial, industrial. And so we hope to come back in the future and get more in alignment with the record of decision. But for tonight, we're recommending just changing the action level for the lead, which I think might be a little different than what's actually written in the staff report. We want to recommend just a change in the action level for the lead from 5,000 to 4,000. And then in a future date, we'll come back with a large change to zoning ordinance, to procedures for cleaning up the contaminated soils, and to our just these standards in general. So,
Why are we not recommending doing it all now?
it's a pretty big undertaking. Once we effect it here, we have to go back and change a handful of documents. So we haven't done it all yet. And in talking with the EPA, there's some changes that they're in the process of making that we want to make sure we're in alignment with things there as well, with CDC recommendations and things like that. So lots of things are in motion, but this is one that we can tackle right now and bring us into alignment and address the concern that the EPA and DER have brought up to us several times. So you have several options tonight. You could recommend to the council to adopt the standard as it is. You could recommend to go and tackle the whole ordinance change and everything, or you could recommend no action. Just for an item, little background on this, the reason the Planning Commission is hearing this is it's because it's in our Land Development Code, which underneath state statute in LEDMA, it's required for the Planning Commission to provide a recommendation to the council on any change for land use code. And yeah, this is on for public hearing tonight. If you have any questions, I can answer them, but I don't know if you want to wait till after you gather public comments on this before we go any further on it.
I have one question. Can we go back to what changes are being recommended? And that's the one in red, right?
Mm-hmm.
The next slide.
Oh, this was.
Isn't that the recommended changes down at the bottom in red?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
So you are still proposing arsenic? Because it sounded like just lead.
So arsenic, you could definitely recommend the change. The EPA, as it says in the staff report, they didn't ask for a change in that, but it is recommended for recreational and open space and agricultural, as you see here. The record of decision recommends 300 for those uses.
So we have 5,000, right?
Yeah.
We have, well, we have 850
Yeah, 850
Oh,
for that one,
for-
for our
for
stick.
Ours.
non-resident. And that's where it is
5,000
kind
for
of
that 850
interesting is because we adopted residential and non-residential. So
Yeah.
we're within the bounds for commercial and industrial, but if you have recreational open space or agricultural, then it's, we're not in alignment with the record of decision on that.
So the question I have though, and I don't know if you have the answer right now, but is there a proximity, let's say commercial to residential? Are they saying there's a buffer zone of the difference, or is it here's a home and next door is commercial and you can go from the 1,600 to the 4,000 within those 2 feet? Is that
There's,
so? There's no buffer protection,
There's
anything
no
between
buffer.
zoning? Okay, that's what I was curious about.
I'm curious about just impact, like how much of our city,
so I should have put
deals
a
with
map on
this.
here. There is a map that shows the operable Unit 3. It follows Butterfield Creek and several hundred feet on each side, all the way from the canyon down to the auto mall.
okay. I'm just curious why they, like, we have 5,000, was that typical for the time? And then they came back and said we should lower it because of,
I'm not
Scientific
sure why we have
research.
5,000. I know why we should have 4,000, but I'm not sure why 5,000 was adopted. We looked back. I don't know if we were able to determine whether or not it was a error in just the way it was written down or adopted that night. But it was definitely, it was 4,000 at one time. It went to 5,000, I think, in 2017. And now,
we had a project or something?
I hope
Get
not.
done.
I hope that was not the case.
Blake, I had a question. So are these for areas that were historically shown to be contaminated, or is every new development tested?
So if we have a map that shows, we have an overlay zone actually that shows where the operable Unit 3 is. Any development in the operable Unit 3, I don't know if it's always been this way, but it should be and it will be going forward, is required to submit a soil characterization plan. So they go out and they do certain samples and then they show us if there is contamination present and what the level of it is. If it's present, but it's underneath the action level, then it can stay and remain. But if it's above the action level, then they have to take the next step and submit a soil remediation plan
But that's just for those properties that are in a certain area.
that are in the operable Unit 3.
So tell me, I don't know a lot about contamination or mining or whatever. Like, since they're still doing mining, is there still contamination happening, or how?
There's not contamination happening any longer. Kennecott's very well-regulated, governed, and they monitor.
Well, they used to carry a lot of the dirt out here because they owned a lot of this land, didn't they? Didn't they carry a lot of it out this way?
So
That's
the,
where a
the
lot of this
dirt wasn't
happened.
where it came from. It was a different mine, and it wasn't Kennecott. It was the water that was watered at that time. So that's why they know where it was.
Okay.
Is they gave the
There you
water
go.
rights to somebody else. So the mine at the time, not Kennecott, it was a different mine, gave the water, and it was in the 70s that they did this. And so they can tell they knew exactly which farms got the water. And that's why it's basically in the Butterfield Creek drainage area, because it went down the old Butterfield Creek. And then, as you know, it's been obliterated since then. And so they actually came in that 2000 timeframe and actually cleaned up all of the old homes. And they said, if you develop, like where Fazio Turkey, the Fazio chicken farm used to be by Tuscany, that's where they came in, and that's why there's a park in the center. That's when they did the remediation and they stuck it underneath the park.
Okay.
So that's kind of how the water
Good
got
to know.
here.
Thank you.
I've just had
Thank you.
a minor, helpful. Sorry, Blake.
Thank you. Anybody that has some history, I'd love to hear about
Minor,
it.
minor question. If you can go forward one slide. In the red there, it says 350, but then in parentheses 300. Is it one or the other?
It should be 300. Sorry, there were some errors in the staff report. We caught them after it was published. We decided not to amend the actual agenda and figured we'd just address it here tonight.
So
thank you.
we'll address that in our motion.
For 300.
Yeah, 300 would be, if you choose to make a motion to recommend to the council, it would be 300 that is what you'd want to do to be in alignment with the record of decision recommended values, which are on that table.
And I mean, the other area that you said is recommended, but is not something that we're looking to change right now is residential lead at 1,200.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? We can ask more after, but I did want to open the public hearing in case there are comments. We'll let you have a seat for the time being. At this time, we'll open the public hearing.
Hello, my name's Andrew Lawrence. I know a lot of you know me, but those of you that don't, I live behind there's a berm of heavily contaminated soil on about 56th West and 126th South and 56th West. When I've looked at the studies and things that they've done, the soil samples, there are levels of lead that are higher than 4,000, but below 5,000. So this is definitely a move in the right direction. There's some that were as high as 4,560 parts per million. But if you look at the table there, the way I interpreted when I read through the record decision is that they set it up as a range on purpose so that it could be kind of conditional based on what type of commercial property they're building and, like you mentioned, next to residential, things like that. So I guess my concerns is that if we, and I don't know how quickly we'll do the other things, but I would love to see all of the plans in place. I really tried to get this on the MDA of they're trying to build a boat dealership and car dealerships and things on this land. But I was unsuccessful, and that was what the feedback was we'll follow all these local laws and things like that. This really is the main local laws, all of these decisions, the numbers, how they're going to test and how they'll remove things like that. So I would just love to have those things in place and crystal clear so that when they come to make those decisions, they'll know whether they'll have to remove that soil. That's always been kind of a vague thing, and I'd love to get that clear, if that makes sense. But being next to residential, and I've looked at other like studies, different cities, different states, it's variable all across the board of what levels they have for lead. I've seen as low as 300. I've seen higher than this, but I would definitely, I know this is kind of the letter of the law from this instructions from 21 years ago, but there's been lots of research and things, and people I've talked to at EPA and DER indicated that things are trending, that they're going to lower these limits. So I think all those kinds of things should be considered. Consult with medical experts. I've talked to toxicologists, the state toxicologists, things like that, and talk about how not only the primary concerns used to be just ingestion, but they've done a lot of studies more about inhalation of things like that. And my concerns are if they're driving around and it will just be constantly stirring up the soils that are next to my house. I would probably recommend level closer to 2,000 parts per million right next to residential. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll close the public hearing at this time and turn to the Planning Commission for additional discussion.
Was there any online comment?
Oh, is there any online comments, Wendy? Okay. Thank you, Jackson. I have, I guess, one thought. Since this is a recommendation going to City Council, and actually two, but the first being, I do recommend that we recommend to them that we drop the residential to 1,200, just because it is at this point anyway, and that is a recommendation from I believe the EPA is what you said. So I do recommend that we make that recommendation to the City Council to just do that part at this point as well, even though it sounds like it's probably not applicable to what's coming. But that, and then just that before it comes to city council, just to do a little more research on neighboring zones, and if there has been recommendations, or since that is a guideline of 1,500 to 4,000, is that because of neighboring zones, or is that there just as if it fits in this, then we're good? And so that it was a very good point, that maybe it's written like that because if it is next to residential, which is obviously a lot lower, they do require it to be lower, or would recommend it to be lower. So that is one recommendation I have that we research before we bring it to the city council.
On the 1,200, I do, if we do drop it to the 1,200, I have a question for Blake. So does that mean you're going to have to mitigate where they're already mitigated?
That's a great question. I'm running that through my mind too, and I'm going to have to contact our consultant and our representatives at the state and EPA.
I mean, I'm happy to pass it along to council, but I almost wonder if we just want to just sit with it open for a little while. I would hate to do a 1,200. I mean, I know of 12 subdivisions. You'd have to go and rip out everybody's yard.
Yeah.
By doing that.
And I don't think, I don't think we'd have to do that, but.
I think it's moving forward, isn't it? Or
it should be anything new development moving forward. Large
There's
projects like that have happened
redevelopments.
in the past, but they're usually driven by EPA and somewhere where they're funded because
Well, I'm
I
just
think
talking about
Midvale
all,
went and
I'm just
ripped
saying, I'm
up.
talking about all of our development. If we've already cleaned it, if our limit was 1,600, I'm thinking of Black Hawk Estates, all the stuff there. I mean, you
Hidden
name it,
Oaks,
anything that touched butter,
Miller Crossing.
a lot of Anthem, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, what level would we? Well, I just would say I would hate to rush it.
Yeah.
And this be a huge impact. I agree with you, Chris, completely.
No,
but
and I understand,
I think we
but-
should just.
But I look at it, if we're making the recommendation to change it here, and we know that from a residential perspective, that the recommendation is 1,200, I think it's probably not in our best interest to not recommend that change as well. And obviously, that's a recommendation, city council can change that, but if we know from the EPA that those are more in line with, from a safety perspective of what should be out there, I don't feel comfortable not recommending it.
I feel like we need more information because let's say someone redoes their landscaping. Is that a scenario where they would be applicable to the new guidelines? And also the part that I would like more clarification on from an education perspective is the range. For commercial, what makes it 1,500 or 2,000 or anything below 4,000? And how do you deal with that?
These are all questions as to why we were just wanting to bring back the one item to get in a conformance with what the EPA was asking, and then come back with all these other items later, because there are a lot of questions. Need to consult legal counsel, talk to our representatives at the state and EPA, just because there's a lot of ramifications for decisions made on this item.
I mean,
I just lean on
it sounds like maybe we need to wait before we start changing stuff too. Then, I mean, does dropping from 5,000 to 4,000 also affect some of our other commercial out there? And I mean, I guess there's a lot of questions. If we start changing this, but we don't change other parts of it that we know are in line with the EPA.
I personally think we just need to continue it and wait for more information so we can attack the whole thing at once. That's
Let me ask
more
this
my
question,
my
though.
opinion.
If we don't act tonight, does that mean their application gets done and in before? Or does it, and then they can go ahead and do it as is at 5,000?
We'll make a recommendation. It'll still go before city council.
Right, but I'm saying if we continue it.
Yeah,
does that
I
mean we
think
continue?
a recommendation needs to be made. But I also, in that recommendation, would say, believe that we probably need to wait in making a motion on this from a city council perspective. That's our recommendation, that they need to get more information before they change it.
Yeah, or we can make a continuing, so we can actually make a recommendation. That's the purpose of our body.
Right.
So to me, I think it's a
But
continue.
well,
That's
what
just
I'm
my
asking
opinion.
is what are the ramifications of if we delay? Or if,
Yeah,
maybe
what's
not
the
delay is the right word,
timeline?
if we continue.
Is there a project coming in that will automatically go in at the 5,000 or the 850?
Yes.
If I believe so, though, because we have a motion, or because this is in, they just wouldn't be allowed to do anything. It'd be stuck.
They were approved through planning commission vested, so they, or not city council, sorry. So they are governed underneath the current ordinance.
So if we
Even though
don't
we're
make the
changing the
ordinance-
If you make the change, I believe we wrote it so that they would be governed under the new ordinance if it were to be adopted by council. So currently, and if there's no action, it'll be 5,000 parts per million for the lead for development on the Crescent piece.
If we were to continue it and they applied before that,
Yeah,
then
that's-
they fall under existing, which is 5,000.
Right. So the Crescent piece does fall under this?
Yes.
Okay, I was curious about that because you were saying, okay.
I was pretty sure that's why this was here.
That was one of the driving forces, yes.
Well, with that being, I don't know. I feel
I
like we
think we
should
move
look at the
forward with
4,000
what-
and the
Yeah, I-
lower.
This is a
both.
recommendation, but I think we do put a recommendation that
But I get what
that
Adam's
it needs
saying.
to come
like,
back.
We need more information. We
do,
need it
but
to come back.
I want to
at
ask that
least.
from the question of our attorney, though, because I thought if we were changing an ordinance, and I thought if we were looking at changing an ordinance, it kind of gets, that it gets put on hold, and if a development is trying to change that, I thought they couldn't do that. Maybe I'm mistaken. Because we're in the middle of changing this ordinance. That's why it's been noticed forever. So if an applicant came in tomorrow, don't they have to wait till we finish up whatever we're doing?
As far as the ordinance changing,
Correct.
you're gonna have properties, and I've just listened to the discussion where if there's a commercial property or something that's built, they've built their property going.
Yeah, if it's grandfathered in at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
And so, y'all dependent on when they're, if we're in the process of working on something like this,
Say they have to wait till this is finalized.
and be done and say, okay, we're working
Have a
on this
moratorium.
project, it's a 5,000 going to 4, so we'd probably write that.
So what I'm saying is we're gonna put that in our motion and we'll control that, I would imagine. So I would just say that.
Sounds like that's already a part of that development.
Another interesting
Maybe we're in
fact,
the beginning talks like this, it could be, months out.
Nothing's been approved to be built on that property yet.
and I
hasn't
wonder
came
if there's some
through.
discrepancy that we can lean to because
No entity to go on that property has been approved yet.
the engineering standards note 4,000 parts per million. The adopted standards for procedures for development of contaminated properties identifies the table with 4,000 in it. And so the only thing that says 5,000 in it that we have published right now is our city code. So this brings that in alignment as well. So
Because don't we usually state in most of our motions that it needs to meet all EPA, et cetera, standards, which in essence means they have to be at 4,000 anyway.
Yep.
Is that incorrect?
We're just trying to get our ordinance aligned.
Well, Blake just had these meetings today with all this new information, so he really hasn't even had a chance to talk.
Yeah.
We'll be talking with him.
yeah, and where it's underneath the development agreement, a lot of those, I can't remember if that one has the clause in it that moratoriums are not allowed unless it's for certain things. Where health and safety is typically one of those things, and that could be this case here.
So
That
could we,
falls in line.
could we say 4,000 with, and then know that we might be reviewing it again just in a few months?
Yeah, that's the intention, is to bring this back in January, maybe February, with these other changes that we've been discussing.
So if we say 4,000, then that aligns with the other, that brings it in congruence with everything else that we've got published, so that it's the same for across the board. And then as we re-examine it in January, then we can see if we want to go lower or.
Yep.
Okay,
Let me change again.
yeah.
That'll be probably a section of the engineering standards, zoning code, the procedures for development of contaminated soils, and all the answers to the questions that have been asked here of how this retroactively affects
So let me pose it one
properties.
other way. If we were to say 2,000 tonight, then it would still be non-congruent with everything else that's already published, or with all our engineering standards. So even then, it would still be a question because the other standards are still different.
So 4,000 is the, changing to 4,000 to bring us in
4,000 clears it up
in
as
line
far
with
as.
everything else we have published right now.
The 4,000 and the 300 for the arsenic.
The 300,
300's
it's still
new.
850 in our engineering standards in our manual. This table is actually in our manual, and in the policy for development of contaminated soils,
The way it is shown here.
this exact table.
All right.
I think one of the tools that might be available to us for this kind of issue in terms of timelines and vesting and stuff is we could do and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but we could file a pending ordinance, a notice of pending ordinance, and that kind of puts alert on, for every project that comes in, just be aware that there is an ordinance change that will affect, and because we filed the notice of pending ordinance before your project came in, you'll be vested to the changes at the outcome of the project, or the outcome of the
Hey, that's
decision.
the right answer.
The other option we have for this crescent parcel, which we did
Yeah.
discuss today with our, with EPA, is the city still owns that parcel, and we need to talk to legal about this because it is under contract, but we could file a environmental covenant on the property, and it records with the property and carries with the property, and in that covenant, we could put a cleanup requirement in there and cover it that way, and that would supersede our ordinance.
But I think from a safety perspective, some of those things have to be considered. It's just one of those areas we can't really sway from, so.
Yep. Which is why we had a 4-hour meeting to make sure that we're being safe and keeping the residents safe and doing the right thing.
Yeah, I think this is a lot bigger than, yeah, this is a big item.
This is the start,
This is our start. That's what we're recommending here.
which is why I think we should just
Let's
move
just
do the
forward with the
recommendation.
start.
That's fine.
And
And
because
then-
more is going to be coming.
Yeah.
Let's get this in.
And then how did
At least we're
you,
not
how
holding
did you
up
word that
anything
if
else.
we make a recommendation to city council, but we also recommend that this becomes a pending ordinance in the future? I guess, I was trying to understand exactly,
I think you could just make the motion that the city look into options to ensure safe development of affected properties in the immediate future.
okay,
And that gives the option, like Blake mentioned, we could put something on the sale of the property. We could do a pending ordinance. Gives us a few options to look at.
because I mean, knowing that EPA recommends 1,200, not 1,600 residential, that's a tough pill for me to swallow of not recommending that to city council. Because
But we don't know the impacts of that.
we know that.
I know the impacts, and that would put us out of alignment with our other documents.
But
That's
at
definitely
least with
something
my
we'll-
understanding, that would be moving forward because there are properties that would be grandfathered in. I mean, there quite possibly is a property that's above this range somewhere that we're unaware of. And so it would be moving forward in the protection of the city.
But they only told you that. They haven't given you any information, correct?
No, that was just brought to my attention today by our consultant. He pointed it out because I thought it had always said 1,600, but the table I was looking at was the reference to the University of Utah study that our council used to make the choice. It was just immediately prior to when the record of decision was published. They adopted 1,600 because in the ROD, there's a paragraph that says, here's what we recommend, but the council adopted this based on this University of Utah study that was done in 1999 or 2000.
That's the only area I have concern with immediately, not saying that we don't need to bring back still, but
Yeah.
but that's the only area immediately that I have some concerns with
We'll
not.
be sure to have that item addressed when we bring it back.
Yeah, but also just, I guess, bring it to the attention of the council. So. Any other questions? Any other discussion? Well, we'll look for a motion to be made.
Can you forward to option, just show the two options again?
The next slide.
Yeah.
Next slide.
So we'd just be accepting option 2.
It'd be changing the
Changing
red.
B.
Yeah.
Changing B.
And then just adjusting the language to read 300 versus 350. Which would be slightly different.
Clint, what was the language you just mentioned about protection for? I missed capturing that as a part of your recommendation. Your thoughts were there?
It sounded really good the
It
first
sounded
time you
good,
said
and I
it.
didn't
The first
write
time
it.
it sounded really good.
Can we just say what Clint said?
Yeah.
Something off the top of my, I can't, it was something along the lines that the city look into alternatives to, I don't know, to protect, or, you know, I don't remember what I said.
It was notice of
basically
notice
to-
of pending ordinance.
Pending ordinance.
Something along the lines of looking at alternatives to help protect affected properties through, you know, a pending ordinance or through the property sale. So giving staff some flexibility in terms of alternatives to look at to help mitigate that negative impact to residents or to affected properties.
It still sounded good, but the first time sounded much better. All right, looking for.
All right, I'll
motion,
go ahead
guys.
and attempt this.
A recommendation to city council.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion that we make a recommendation to city council for the associated red changes on this slide, with the change for the arsenic level of 300 milligrams per kilogram, not the 350, the 300, and also add to that a recommendation that the city look into alternatives to help protect affected properties through a pending ordinance to be applicable to these ordinances as well. Hopefully that meets it. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Motion made by Andy, second by Brody. We'll call for a vote. Brody?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Heather?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
And Andrea?
Yes.
All right, that'll move on to city council. Any other comments from the planning commission?
I just had one. This kind of brought up looking at radon levels from a residential perspective. I don't know, there's a lot of people in my neighborhood that have had to put in radon mitigating systems, and maybe looking at doing some type of study before subdivisions go in, that the builders put those mitigating systems in when they do residential construction. Just a thought to look at.
I think that's a good point. We'll just have to see what the state
Yeah.
requirements are on that. That might be a good education.
That's a tough one because the radon changes
As you disturb.
after initial
Yeah.
construction.
Yeah. So it may be good to at least understand that. Maybe that could be in a training meeting or something on understanding EPA / let's add radon in there. So any other comments? All right, future meetings. Next city council meeting is Wednesday, October 26th. Next planning commission meeting is Thursday, November 3rd. And then after that, another city council meeting Wednesday, November 9th. Motion to adjourn?
Not yet. Not yet.
What?
Not
Oh,
yet.
not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. A couple more words from Clint in honor of Talia.
That's awesome.
I love that.
So we mentioned Natalia, we said, earlier today, I said, look, if you want to leave, we can cover your item, it's going to be okay. But she really wanted to stick around for tonight, so we're going to milk this for all it's worth. So Talia, if you want to come on up. She's been here since June of last year, I think, so 16 months about. She's been to about 32 planning commissions, probably done at least 50 presentations here. And I just want to stress how great of an employee she's been. I think from the get-go, her strong suit has always been presentation. I've heard from several of the commissioners, lots of staff, that her presentations have always been really good and well thought out and well done and well presented. She learned quick. She's adjusted to all of our adjustments, which is a daily occurrence sometimes. And yeah, she's been a great, a great asset to our team. She's now moving on to colder pastures, to Alaska.
Do they have pastures? Do they have grass up there?
I don't know. They have bears.
Tundra?
So colder and meaner pastures. But we just wanted to appreciate her for always doing things the right way. We pass this around to staff. You can see, she's been a real vital part of our team. In just the short time that she's been here, she's made a real impact. So we just wanted to tell her how much we appreciate her and wish her best of luck. And this wouldn't be complete if Mike didn't have a book and a book bone, which I've never seen.
That's
but
cool.
to go along with that. So thank you very much, Talia.
No, I really appreciate it. I was thinking today, it's such an honor to rub shoulders with professionals and architects, engineers, and planners.
And us too.
Yeah, and you guys, yeah. You guys are all right.
Well, we weren't in any of those
Yeah.
categories, so.
No, and I really appreciate rubbing shoulders with you and learning. This is my first job out of college, so I'm still figuring everything out, and I appreciate your patience and your willingness to let me learn with you guys. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Talia. We appreciate everything you've done. You've made it a lot easier for us, actually. So we appreciate that. Are we done now, guys?
Oh, actually, I have something to add.
All
I'm
right, Heather,
sorry,
go ahead.
I just remembered. So last time I talked about the little libraries, well, we never passed an ordinance. I thought we did, but we didn't. And I would like to bring that back.
Yes. And I apologize, it essentially just fell behind for other priorities. And initially, I was also thinking, perhaps, and I shared this with you by email, maybe we did not need to come up with a regulatory control. I mean, people can put like a mailbox in their park strip and they don't have to get a permit. But in talking with Bryce in engineering, he thought maybe we should at least internally review the issue. We have a sample ordinance that we downloaded from another community. So I agree. I think we will formally review it. If for some reason, if the administration feels like it is not required in order to, allow our residents to install free little libraries, we'll let you know. But we'll anticipate bringing that back. We had also talked about trying to put it on the next meeting. But in order to accommodate this internal review, I think it'll probably be the meeting after. So it'll probably be a month before you see it back on your agenda again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys.